Thomas Tuchel to say yes to the Manchester United job this time, but will INEOS offer him a job? A big meeting is going on right now as I speak to determine Ten Hag's future. Some sources believe he could be going, some sources believe he could be staying, some sources believe he could be going with a surprise plan on the route. We will get through all the news and information on that, but before we talk about the manager situation, because we've been talking about it a lot, I want to talk about the latest on the injury front, players pulling out of international break, and then later on in today's video, we're going to talk about two new Academy Wonderkid signings that United are meeting and hoping to bring in. We know in the past we brought in the likes of Ian Cheery, Toby Collier, Harry Amas. I think they Ian Cheery and Harry Amas came in 2 seasons ago. I remember 4 seasons ago bringing in Garnacho, Alvaro Fernandez. United looking to bring in some more absolute ballers for the academy on top of, Lasal, Obi Martin, and Overy that they brought in this year. So, guys, please do go ahead and hit that like button if you have not already. And, of course, subscribe down below if you're new. Let's get into the first story, which is on the injury stuff. And I think this is great stuff. Fergie used to do this back in the day. Maynard, Garnacho and Mazraoui could all still be involved against Brentford, but they've withdrew from international duty as a precaution. They've done no Luke Shaw by going injured and then being out of Man United longer. They've put club before country. They're all 3 players that have got a bit of an injury. They've been playing for a little bit of an injury for Manchester United, and they could go out on international duty and play for that injury even more, or they could take the 2 weeks rest, and they've taken the 2 weeks rest. The one thing I'm going to say is, if Garnacho's played the last 2 games injured, why? Well, I know Garnacho's in good form, but Marcus Rashford was really good in that first half versus Porto and shouldn't have been subbed off at half time for an injured Garnacho. And Amad Diallo, didn't even get a minute versus Aston Villa when Garnacho was injured, who plays 90 minutes, and Anthony gets on. So that's my only question around it. And Mayno obviously got that rest versus Porto, but I'm glad that all 3 players have dropped out of international duty. This is something that happened under Fergie. Get them back for a new manager, get them back to help Ten Hag save his job. We'll be talking about that in a second, because obviously this was said last night, but here is the context for you if you weren't aware or didn't watch last night's live stream. Erik Ten Hag's future at United will be decided at an executive summit tomorrow, so today. Ruud van Nistelrooy's favoured caretaker as replacement should a change be made, and Ten Hag's fate will be decided on Tuesday when Man United's hierarchy meet for crunch talks with Thomas Tuchel, the favourite to succeed him. So what's been said on Thomas Tuchel? Because the only reason Thomas Tuchel isn't the Manchester United manager right now is because he rejected us in the summer. They would have sacked Ten Hag and brought in Tuchel had Tuchel not rejected us in the summer. So Tuchel's now got a lot of leverage if we go back in, because we're probably going to have to offer him what he wants. Now, it was said that Thomas Tuchel was favourite to replace Erik Ten Hag, and Tuchel was open to becoming Manchester United manager and is ready. Tuchel's fate will be decided tomorrow, and that Tuchel would say yes to Manchester United job if the offer met the right conditions. So, Thomas Tuchel apparently is now open to becoming the next Manchester United manager, and if the right offer came in that matched his conditions, he would take the job. Considering he rejected us in the summer because we didn't offer him the conditions he wants, he's got a lot of leverage. But we're in 2 scenarios. INEOS want to work in a certain way, Tuchel doesn't. So do they abandon the principles to get Tuchel in to just save us short term? Or do they say we need a manager that's going to fit what we want to do and take a risk on somebody else? Because I think Tuchel's probably the safest bet in terms of who's going to probably get the best out of this squad right now until the end of the season. Tuchel. But is Tuchel what they want in the next 2-3 years? That's the big question around it as well. It was said by Melissa Reddy, despite a lot of reports about Tuchel and us wanting Tuchel and him being lined up as a replacement, which is, we know Jim Ratcliffe would sack Ten Hag for Tuchel tomorrow if he had it his way. Man United have not made for approach for Thomas Tuchel yet, with Ten Hag on brief holiday while the club's executive committee meet in London to discuss the next step. So Ten Hag has gone on holiday. We've not made a decision on Tuchel yet. So they might make a decision tomorrow, but then they might talk to a few managers before we know. It could be a situation where we know today that they've sacked Ten Hag. It could be a situation where today they've decided to sack Ten Hag, but they're going to go speak to managers the next few days to make sure they can actually get someone in that they want. A little bit like in the summer, how they decided to sack Ten Hag, they spoke to a few managers, realised they couldn't get the manager they wanted, so rather than doing a Bayern Munich and who asked Tuchel to stay in the end, they were like, we'll just go back to Ten Hag, because they never actually sacked Ten Hag or told him to leave. Or they might decide just give him to the October international break. It's going to be one of 3 outcomes. Now, before I get into the next story on what's been said about Ten Hag and what's likely to happen in the meeting today. The voting closes for the Football Content Awards on Sunday, the 13th of October, and I've been nominated for 3 awards at this year's FCA: Best Club Content Creator, Best In-Video Individual, and Best Influencer. So it would be much appreciated if you could go and vote for me in the Football Content Awards if you have not already. I'll put a link in the description as well, but they're the 3 I've been voted for. I'd really love to win at least one of them this year, but who knows. Continuing on, let's go into what has been said by Chris Wheeler. With notable exception of former England boss Southgate, United would be picking from a similar field that includes Thomas Frank, De Zerbi, Potter, McKenna, and Marco Silva. Now, De Zerbi's at Marseille, so we're not going to get him. Marco Silva, not the biggest fan of. Graham Potter, I like him, but there's definitely a few question marks around him. Thomas Frank, I like, but there's question marks around him. McKenna, I like, and there's question marks around him. I like Frank, I like Potter, I like McKenna. McKenna's my favourite on that list, followed by Frank, probably followed by Potter, probably followed by Silva. I'm not going to count De Zerbi because I don't think he's going to be available. But there's definitely question marks around all those candidates. And I think this is one of the reasons Ten Hag kept this job, because any one of these candidates is a risk. But then you could say Arne Slot to Liverpool was a risk and it's working. Enzo Maresca to Chelsea was a risk and it's working. What's happening with Ten Hag really isn't working. Is it worth taking the risk and getting someone that maybe was our 3rd or 4th choice because it's worked with other clubs? Maybe we do need to be more ruthless. Well, what's the reality? In reality, Jim Ratcliffe is believed to have a decisive say on Ten Hag's position, with Barada and Ashworth making recommendations. Now, this is what we know from the Muppeteers, The Athletic, things that I've heard, other reliable sources. Jim Ratcliffe has said enough is enough. If he had it his way, Ten Hag would be out, Tuchel would be in. That's what we tried to do in the summer. He wanted Ten Hag on, he wanted Tuchel in. Jim Ratcliffe does not want Ten Hag to stay, but Jim Ratcliffe is putting the decision in the executive's hands, Barada and Ashworth, because he knows he needs to take his emotional bias out and listen to the guys at the club that run the club, and they know the footballing stuff. That's what he's trying to do. Ashworth and Barada want to give Ten Hag more time because they've just said we're 7 games into the season, we brought in all his coaches, spent all this money, the financial implications of sacking them now. But Ashworth and Barada wanted to stay because they wanted to turn it around. But do Ashworth and Barada really believe you can turn it around? Or are we delaying the inevitable? And that's what they will be discussing in the meeting today. Because I think Ratcliffe wants to pull the trigger. I think Ashworth and Barada want to wait a bit longer. I think even in the meeting, if they say we're going to keep Ten Hag, they might say we're going to keep him, but we're going to reassess on November 3rd. That's what they might say. And on November 3rd, they might say, you know what, time for him to go. I think that's what the case could be. Continuing on, Andy Mitten, a very reliable source of information, has said that Ten Hag's position is being seriously questioned and it's very, very up in the air. And that was said by Andy Mitten. Now, we've got some sources saying that INEOS don't really want to sack Ten Hag, and we've got other sources saying the pressure is on. Would they be surprised if Ten Hag wasn't sacked? His position's up in the air. I'm going to be honest, I'm 65% Ten Hag stays, 35% Ten Hag goes. I think Ten Hag could stay. I think he could stay and they could give him a bit longer, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes. And I feel like he's more likely to stay just off what I've heard. But I think if INEOS speak to a manager that they want, and that manager says, I'll come to United now, I think they'd sack Ten Hag. I think some of it might depend on what the plan is if they do sack Ten Hag. I think what they'll be discussing today is if we do sack Ten Hag, what's the plan? Is that a good enough plan to sack Ten Hag for? I think that's one of the things that they will be discussing today. There's lots of mixed reports, and part of me wouldn't be surprised if he stays, if I'm going to be totally honest, because the reports are so mixed. But I feel like they're a bit worried to pull the trigger, if I'm going to be honest. I feel like they are a little bit worried to pull the trigger and take the risk as well. So let's talk about the next story going on. Erik Ten Hag has left for a short holiday, working very much on the basis that he expects to be in charge when Manchester United return to action against Brentford after the international break. So Ten Hag's on holiday, acting like he could be safe. I remember when Ollie went on holiday in the October international break before he was sacked. Then about 3 weeks later, we lost 4-1 to Watford and he was sacked. It feels like he's gone on holiday, he's safe, and he's going to do an Ollie and be sacked for 3 weeks, if I'm going to be totally honest. That's what it feels like, doesn't it? So we'll have to see. They could sack him while he was on holiday. He was on holiday for 2 weeks while they were discussing his future last time. It's like he goes on holiday, but every time he knows INEOS are discussing his future. Anyway, let's talk about Thomas Frank. Brentford manager Thomas Frank is among potential successors to replace Ten Hag. Thomas Frank took a little bit of time to get going at Brentford, which is my only real concern around him. But, I mean, Thomas Frank scored more goals in one game with Brentford this season, and we have all season. So I'm not totally against that appointment, despite there being probably better options out there. Now, let's talk about things unrelated to the manager situation, because this is something that Manchester United have succeeded at, is youth signings. Swansea City youth starlets Harlan Perry, and Brohan Popham are attracting interest from both Manchester United, are both attracting interest from Manchester United, and are understood to have a scheduled meeting with the teenage duo representatives. So, Manchester United are meeting two young players that play for Swansea about potentially signing them. What Manchester United do is they like to sign some of the best 15, 16 and 17-year-olds in England and bring them to our academy. That's something we do very well at. I'm not super familiar with these players, but apparently they're two of the best academy players over in Wales, over in the Swansea youth setup, and United are interested in bringing them in. So we could be having two more academy signings soon, which is exciting. And finally, it was said that United have been approached by several production companies on behalf of Netflix, Amazon and Disney Plus to make behind-the-scenes documentary of the club's planned revival under Sir Jim Ratcliffe. United have not ruled out agreeing to a documentary at some stage. So we could see a big Manchester United Netflix documentary, which is what I'd like to personally see. I watched the Arsenal one, I've watched the Sunderland one. I'd like to see a United documentary. Let me know your thoughts down below, guys, but make sure you subscribe with the post notification bell on, because we do get any updates on Ten Hag's future today. I will be live to update you guys as well. The feeling is that Ratcliffe wants Ten Hag to go, but the execs might give him longer. Thank you for watching. Bye.